Hello and welcome to Made a Hames Out of It. I'm Kate Hames and I hope you're having a fabulous day. Here at Made a Hames Out of It, we find disasters, curses and sometimes total fuck-ups, which are generally hilarious and usually only for our own pleasure, but it would be rude not to share. Let me explain the whole Made a Hames Out of It. A hames is a piece of equipment used on horses. It is made out of either metal or wood and is attached to the horse's collar. It then distributes weight evenly around the horse's neck and shoulders. Interesting, I hear you say, but what the fudge has that got to do with anything? Well, these hameses are apparently quite tricky to attach or at least fit correctly. And so, many years ago, a saying was born. You made a right hames out of that. And honestly, that fits so perfectly for my ever so interesting family of Hameses, whose lives have often been tainted with ill fate, ironic missed opportunities, eerie cases of bad luck, and an ominous air of being cursed. And with that in mind, I want to bring you some disasters from around the world, some curses, some misfortune. Are they all just random incidents, coincidences, or is something more sinister at play? This week, we're going to look into the Polish king, Casimir Jagiellon. I'm not entirely sold on that pronunciation, but I'm sure somebody will let me know that if it's wrong. Okay, so ask anyone what they know about cursed tombs, and I bet they'll mention Tutankhamun or King Tut, as he is also known. But how often have you heard people talk about the Polish king, Casimir Jagiellon? I'd never heard of him before I started this podcast. In fact, I don't think I could even name another Polish king. Casimir was the Grand Duke of Lithuania from 1440 and King of Poland from 1447 until his death in 1492. And I'm sure he did loads of cool stuff in those years, but this ain't no history lesson. We're here to hear about curses and misfortune. We want the good stuff, damn it! He's actually considered to be one of the greatest kings of his time, and did actually do some cool shit for Poland, so well done that man. However, he can't have been a total angel since he ended up cursing at least 15 people 500 years after he died. Okay, maybe that's a bit of a stretch. Or is it? I suppose it all depends on what you believe. So, let me explain how we've come to believe that Casimir's tomb was cursed. He was alive, he became king, some stuff happened, he died. On Friday the 13th, I know, right? 1973, a group of archaeologists made the fatal mistake of cracking open a 500-year-old biological time bomb. Back in 1492, a 65-year-old Casimir had died in what is now Grodno, Belarus. It was a hot summer's day, and his body needed to be transported to Krakow, which was over 350 miles away. Those who were responsible for preparing his body for burial were surprised at how quickly he was decomposing, and so they wrapped his body in the usual expensive cloths of the day and poured calc, or lime as it's also known, over him, and covered the wooden coffin in resin, thus creating the perfect environment for lots of scary bacterial growth. Dun dun dun! Fast forward to 1973. Now, just imagine what little nasties have been multiplying and thriving in the perfect environment of decaying flesh in that lovely damp and dark tomb for the last 500 years. So, with permission from the Archbishop of Krakow, a team of scientists began the excavation of King Casimir's tomb in order to examine the remains and ultimately restore the burial chamber. On that fateful Friday, with 12 researchers present, the tomb was opened. And suddenly all hell broke loose. A swirling vortex came spiraling out of the almost disintegrated coffin, followed by screams of agonising terror, and the ghost of King Casimir stood before them and bellowed, "Who disturbs my slumber?" And everyone ran off screaming. The end. Just kidding. They cracked that bad boy open and probably found some sort of squidgy mess. I'm not entirely sure what it looked like. I'm guessing not just bones because of how it had all been sealed up and preserved. Whatever it looked like, it probably wasn't pretty, and since it was covered in loads of bacterial fungus gunk, it probably didn't smell too great neither. Out of the 12 researchers and scientists that were present, 4 had died within a few days of opening the tomb. And in the years that followed, at least 15 people who were directly involved with the opening of the tomb or working in the laboratories would also die. Now, at face value, that's pretty unsettling, and you'd be forgiven for thinking that there must be some sort of mystical force at work here, surely. And honestly, there will be some people who will just leave it at that. They'll think, yep, cursed, obviously, don't need to look into this any further. Then, of course, you get those pesky scientists and thinkers, the ones who caused all the kerfuffle in the first place. They come along and say, hold on a minute, there must be a rational explanation for this, because that's obviously how scientists talk. And of course there is, as I have mentioned previously. The tomb was the perfect breeding ground for lots of bacteria, toxic bacteria. 3 types to be exact. A little bit of science. We had Aspergillus flavus. Many strains of this particular fungus will produce mycotoxins, which are toxic to mammals when consumed and can also be particularly dangerous to those with a compromised immune system. Next, we have Penicillium rubrum. I couldn't really find much else out about this apart from it causing abdominal pain, jaundice and convulsions. I suppose that's enough really. And then we have Penicillium rugulosum, which sounds like a spell from Harry Potter. But I found out even less about that one. I think it's safe to say that they're all not great for human consumption. What I did find out is that these species of fungi produce aflatoxins, and these can cause a whole host of problems if they come into contact with your skin or if they are inhaled. Contact with these toxins can cause developmental problems in children and stunt growth. They can also cause cirrhosis or carcinoma of the liver and liver or gallbladder cancer. Basically, you're best staying away from it. Several of the team who excavated the tomb would unfortunately go on to be diagnosed with cancer or other diseases. Sources didn't state what other diseases, but probably not very nice ones. Dr. Boleslaw Smith, a microbiologist, would suffer problems with his equilibrium for many years after the excavation. However, he didn't die until the year 2000, so maybe King Casimir liked him for some reason. There was also Dr. Edward Rosici, who apparently survived, although until when I do not know, as I couldn't find a thing about him. Maybe he gets to live forever. Who knows? I think it's safe to assume that the people involved here were killed due to a lack of proper consideration of the factors. It's remarkably similar to the King Tut curse, where they've raced in all excited and not really thought about the risks. We can maybe forgive Howard Carter and co just a little. Health and safety wasn't at the forefront of their minds, I'm sure. But we'll learn from our mistakes, and unfortunately that wasn't the case for King Casimir's gravediggers. Will you continue to look at this story as the cursed King Casimir, or do you think the case is solved and the deaths were simply due to some funky fungus? Or could you also argue that the fungus was only a problem because Casimir rained down a curse on all who dared to disturb his eternal rest? I suppose we'll actually never know. Whilst I was researching bits for this podcast, I randomly came across Socorro Island and Archie Smith. I have no idea how that managed to wheedle its way into my research of this particular episode. However, I found it extremely interesting, and it's a bit of a weird story, but I think you should definitely go and check it out. I will link it in the information for this episode, but just in case you want to quickly go Google it now, that's Socorro Island. Socorro Island. Archie Smith. Very weird story, and some awesome newspaper clippings that you can check out as well. Well, that is it for this time. I hope you have enjoyed the very first MAHOOI, or made a hames out of it. If so, please come say hi. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at made a hames out of it, or on Twitter at made a hames. And don't forget, don't go sniffing any mummies. Bye!